First, I would like to introduce Ilaria Chan. She is the group advisor for Grab, the world's third largest transportation platform behind Uber and Didi. Before joining Grab, she was the executive director of sales and trading at Goldman Sachs, focused on Asia equities with a portfolio of more than $100 billion of assets under management. She was promoted to that role from an analyst position within 3.5 years. So she has a nose for following the money. Ilaria is also a private investor on the boards of humanitarian NGOs like Emancipation and Care for Children that focuses on victims of child trafficking and their mental well-being, in addition to serving as an advisory committee member for GlobalSF Women. Thank you, Ilaria. Advisor to All Ventures, which is the largest global education tech-focused venture capital fund. She's an independent consultant and an itinerant global speaker. Ilaria holds a BA from Stanford University. On a personal level, she is also a freelance singer, concert pianist, food critic, and restaurateur, culinary school graduate, oh my God, actress in musicals and plays, an amateur photographer, and an avid scuba diver. You're a busy girl, and I don't know how you have time to do anything else. Anyway, I am delighted to also introduce Debby Soo, currently the Chief Commercial Officer of both Kayak and Opentable. She joined Kayak as a business school intern with various roles across product, marketing, sales, and business development before starting her career at Kayak as manager of the Android product platform driving business development for iOS and Android. Since then, Debby worked on marketing to grow Kayak's business through partnerships with Bing, Comcast, AOL, Google, Facebook, and American Express, just to name a few. And then she moved to revenue generating and opened up Brazil and Canada for Kayak. And after that, she has been responsible for launching more than half of Kayak's 50+ international locales. And this led her to being promoted to Vice President of Asia Pacific in 2014, when she developed strategies and forged partnerships with the region's key airlines and hotel brands and online travel agencies, OTAs, in the 12 local markets. In 4 years, APAC became a sustainable business, generating $30 million in revenue. 2 years into her Asian adventure, Debby was tapped to come back to the US to lead business development for Kayak in North America. She became Chief Commercial Officer in 2017, no surprise. She is also responsible now for all strategic partnerships at Opentable. Prior to Kayak and business school at MIT Sloan School of Management, Debby was at Google and started her working career at Citigroup. She obtained her BA from Stanford, very much like Ilaria. They were friends there. As you can see, we have 2 Stanford grads who started as analysts and have done well. Let's start with questions now, shall we? Let's start with, what do each of you, or do you want to start with introductions for some comments and then we go into the questions? Ilaria, Debby?
You've done a great job.
Yeah, I don't know what more I can even say.
Okay, we will start with the questions. Let's start with a high-level question. What are the high-level trends you are each seeing in the hospitality industry? And can you share how this compares across different regions?
Sure, I can take a first crack of that, Ilaria, if you're okay with that. So on the Opentable side, so dining side, for those of you who are not familiar with Opentable, though I hope everyone is, we are a table management software platform that restaurants can use to manage their front of house operations, essentially. So diners can go to Opentable, and instead of calling restaurants or walking in, they can make a reservation on their app or on our website. And then we help restaurants manage, their seating, their flows, and all of that. When COVID first hit, the halt in the dining side of the business was immediate. So when cities started shutting down and restaurants, basically were not able to have dine-in guests, you saw demand drop drastically. Opentable has shared this data publicly. You can go to our website, and it's like opentable.com/state of the industry. And you can actually see week over week for every single city that we have over 50 restaurants in, what the impact has been. And so I think in April was probably the lowest point, where you saw reservations drop by almost 98, 99% year over year. This is across all cities in the US. OpenTable also has a large presence in the UK, Australia. We have significant presence in Germany. So you saw it across the board, just a stopping in all activity. We had put delivery as an option on our sites and apps maybe 6 months before COVID hit. And the pickup on that was tiny, right? People come to OpenTable to make a reservation for a dine-in experience. They don't necessarily come to us, when they're looking for Thai takeout. But we wanted people to come. The ultimate goal is to have OpenTable be the place that you go to anytime you have any dining needs, right? So we experimented with delivery and partnered with companies like Uber Eats, Caviar, Deliveroo, etc. And what we saw during COVID, at the start of COVID, is delivery activity skyrocketed for us, as you can imagine. And now what we're seeing, now that we're 3 months into this global pandemic and cities are starting to open up, you're seeing demand pick back up. So people are hungry, literally, to go out and dine out. And so where cities have opened up outdoor seating, for example, you see reservations start picking up. Restaurants have had to really alter for the ones who are still in business, and we anticipate that we think about 20% of all restaurants in the US will not survive this pandemic. Even on our own platform, we're seeing churn due to a lot of restaurants closing down. And for those of you dialed in who are in the restaurant industry, you'll know that it's an industry with extremely tight margins. You don't go open a restaurant for the purpose of making money, right? You have to really love hospitality and love food and love being such a critical member of that community you're in. That's why you get into it. And so restaurants are just getting hammered right now. And at OpenTable, we're trying to do everything we can to help them. We have suspended all of our subscription fees for our software. We've suspended cover fees. So basically, OpenTable this year will be making very, very little money. And we think that's the right thing to do to try to help our restaurant partners survive this crisis.
Giving back to the community. And what about you, Ilaria? What are you seeing?
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. Thank you, Debbie. So I am based, supposedly, I'm currently in San Francisco, but I'm based in Singapore. I spend most of my time with Grab, which is the largest Southeast Asia tech company there. We are like a super app platform with, mobility like Uber, but also food delivery, grocery delivery, medicine delivery, fintech in lending, wealth management service, et cetera, et cetera. What we're seeing, though, is same as Debbie, huge uptick in delivery tech, which is obvious. However, what is worth highlighting of what I'm seeing in Asia versus the rest of the world is that I know in US, for example, out of US, 30% of the US restaurant revenue usually is food not consumed in restaurant. And out of that chunk, 70% is takeout. So actually people love in the States going to pick up takeout for themselves, partly because of the large car ownership. In Asia, though, it's the opposite. We're in very high density areas. 650 million people live in Southeast Asia in the 8 countries that we operate in. And most of them don't have cars because the affordability is very unaffordable for normal people. So hence, delivery tech, even in a pre-COVID world, created massive convenience and efficiency for people, especially in a part of the world where infrastructure is crippling. If anyone has been to Jakarta or Manila, you can literally get stuck in a car for 2 hours in traffic to go a 1 mile distance. And so to be able to have motorcycles to do the job for you, to go bring you the coffee, the meal, the medicine, the gum, the groceries, the stationery is transformational for people living out there. So one of the high level trends that we see that is escalated is what I would like to call leapfrog digitization. And the reason is that out of our region, we operate in, from Singapore, Malaysia to Myanmar, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, etc. 60 to 70% of the people actually don't have bank accounts. So, correct. And I can go into that later if there's interest, but based on that, you're moving people from people who store money and savings under their bed to suddenly you have apps, you have a bank account so that you can pay online and use this O2O platform. At the same time, you're also giving them services that they've never experienced before. And the COVID period really allows for this escalated usage for people to just go digital all the way. Whether you're a sophisticated investment banker from UBS who's forced to work from home and trade from home, or your mom and pop in the corner street of Kalimantan in Indonesia where you have to order food for the first time because you don't have another choice. This has been a massive uptick. So I would say that. And then next thing is actually emergence of creative ways to consume food if we're focusing on hospitality. So there's the cloud kitchen, dark kitchen concept, which I'll go into later on in the chat. That has been very important in the efficiency of delivery. That's a great trend that I see will continue post-COVID based on the economics and also the new trend of people loving this efficient way of ordering food. And a little bit comment on transport with derived demand on restaurant and hotel is that because we are in transport and we see so much data in Southeast Asia, we do feel like most people will tone down and reduce their business travel post-COVID. Partly we realized we don't need to get on the road. I used to travel to 3 to 4 cities a week during the peak time of my travel. And actually we don't really need to. And I think right now this period allows us to reset. So if you have a very conservative estimation of, let's say, 1 out of 5 business trips, you cancel it. And mind you, business segment is usually the highest margin, least price sensitive segment for travel. That would be like a 20% hit to the margin. And that also most of the time for traveling on air and on land gives you good hotels, good restaurants, and all of those we're watching to see what will happen. But this trend I think is global, and we will be able to see how it plays out after COVID.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, on the kayak side, we don't anticipate air travel coming back anytime soon. Just think of it yourself personally. What will it take for you to feel good about getting on a plane? It's gonna take a lot, and it's not just gonna be lower prices on the airlines front. Exactly. I mean, so what we are seeing on the kayak side is that car rentals, right, is going through the roof. So people want to get out, want to leave their homes or their apartments, and so are renting cars to take their families or partners or whatever, and driving a few hours. And we're also seeing that the types of destinations people are searching for both accommodations or car rentals are very different. So people aren't looking to go to New York or San Francisco or LA. They're looking to go to Joshua Tree or, places more off the beaten path, where there aren't as many people, where it's outdoors. So I think we've seen significant shifts in consumer and traveler and diner preferences due to COVID, and it's understandable. What's going to be interesting is how long that persists, right? As Ilaria said, people who travel all the time for work, you're realizing, like, do I really need to be gone 5 times a month? Like, am I equally productive, staying at home or staying in one city and working? And I think a lot of people are coming to the realization that Ilaria is that, like, maybe I don't need to. And so maybe travel, especially business travel, will be altered for the long run.
Yeah, so, talking about pivoting and how demand is now changing, what does that mean? Because industry, they're trying to rebuild themselves and businesses have to interpret what this new norm means, right? So what do you think are going to be the biggest opportunities then moving forward for chefs, branding,
Yeah.
city branding, safety?
I think there's so many opportunities. Even for restaurants, right? It's adapting to the new norm. And I think that's going to be really hard because, a lot of restaurants with the social distancing rules, depending on what city you operate in, your capacity could be cut in half, right? And the economics of that just don't work, right? If you're a restaurant that can usually seat 100 people and with 3 turns a night, and then all of a sudden that's cut in half, it's not like their rent gets cut in half, right? Like, so there's a lot of fixed costs that restaurants have, where they will still have to pay, but then not to have the same level of traffic coming in is going to be problematic. So I think the opportunity there, and you're seeing a lot of restaurants do it already, is offering delivery. We've had restaurants on OpenTable, like fine dining restaurants, who would never dream of offering their food via delivery or takeout, and now have essentially been forced to in order to survive. I think takeout will continue to be a permanent fixture in our lives as diners and for restaurants. I think those of you who are in, I think, as Ilaria was saying, like the digitization of how we live and work and operate in the real world is real here. So anything like when you walk into a restaurant, restaurants are talking about like not having a menu, right? Because everyone's touched that menu. Not having to take out your credit card and pay. So at OpenTable, we're looking at, and in the US, compared to, in Asia, we are behind on things like mobile payments, contactless pay, right? We don't really have super apps yet in the US. And so we're playing catch up right now during this period, because this is what people need, right? People don't want to be fiddling with cash or their credit cards. So we're thinking about, or we're also developing a product where you can order the food on your phone. You can even order, before you get to the restaurant. So, you're there, you sit down, you enjoy your meal, you pay on your app, and all of that is contactless and easy and seamless. My husband is an entrepreneur, and he manufactures digital signage. So basically think of like screens that you see outside businesses. And he's gotten huge interest from restaurant owners because restaurants want to be able to say and like dynamically change around their messaging outside. Hey, we're open for takeout, or open for delivery, or this is the menu we're featuring today. Or even inside the restaurant, a screen that lists the daily menu, so they don't have to be printing menus and handing them out. So there's just, it is going to be a new world. And I think for people who can get in front of those trends and see those trends, there's a lot of opportunity too.
Yes,
Great.
spot on. I think that when we look at, food tech, right, there's a part where it's the science and the agriculture, much more upstream, but the part that, we're looking at here is much more, how food is being distributed, how it's being consumed, and what is the value proposition here, right? For us, for example, like during this whole period, we saw like a 320% growth in our food segment. And that's like ready meal delivery. Of course, grocery delivery is a whole different land of its own. But I do want to draw, when you ask about opportunities, Darlene, on this subject of cloud kitchen, dark kitchen. I don't know how many people in the audience know what it is, but basically a dark kitchen / cloud kitchen is essentially a kitchen that has a piece of real estate, usually in a not very expensive, not very prime place, is created to allow multiple food merchants to be centralized in one location. So for example, you can have Olive Garden, Pizza Hut, Food Panda, whatever, not Food Panda.
Panda Express.
There you go. That's the one. Panda Express, all of them to be in one place, and it's powered by data. So you can fill gaps in cuisine demands, what's coming in, what's not. And the beauty of it is this cloud kitchen is created solely for the purpose of delivery. So most of these merchants will choose like 8 of the menu items that are the hottest items, best sellers, and that's the only thing that they'll make. So there is a very good throughput, right? Efficiency and throughput, massive reduction in real estate costs, if any. For us, for example, in Southeast Asia, we built the real estate and invite merchants to come. And then you have people ready to deliver. So the waiting time is the biggest opportunity cost. At least I know in the US, when you order from Postmates or any of the apps, right? Restaurants don't want to cook until the driver comes because they want their food to be fresh. Drivers, depending on which city you're in, if you're San Francisco, good luck, because people don't even want to park their bikes because they think it's going to be stolen. So there's all these things. You end up waiting like an hour and a half just for a delivery, which is why the customer experience is bad. Now, Cloud Kitchen, if it's organized well, both on the kitchen side and also on the fleet side, is that customer will have very expectable, efficient, normally a 30 to 40-minute window and consistent quality experience. So that changes the landscape. And for us in Asia, that is not just for the customer. There are three groups of people involved here. There's the merchants, the people, restaurant producing the food. There's the delivery people who's making a living out of this. And then there's also the customers. And we want to serve, at least for us, Grab, in Southeast Asia, all these segments. And job creation is a huge theme for us in that part of the world. And I would dare say for all developing nations is that opportunities also include how do you create more gig economy people? You allow more opportunities for people to make income. And then you also help perfect and fill in the supply demand gaps because of that.
Yeah. And then so have we touched on the super app? Because I know Debbie mentioned it and then you started talking about it. You want to elaborate a little bit more about the super app that you guys are working on and how that plays into everything here?
Sure. I mean, that if people are familiar with actually China, right? Tencent, Alibaba, their super app. So super app really is just an app that has more than one vertical. It has multiple functions. And in one app, you can do it all. So we are Southeast Asia's #1 mobile platform. We were founded 8 years ago, started off as the Uber of Southeast Asia, just mobility transport. But 2-3 years ago, we actually merged with Uber's operations out in Southeast Asia. We acquired their assets and we became a super app. So we also encompass food delivery, grocery delivery, parcel delivery. We have a fintech arm that has lending and payments. We're the largest payment wallet there. So kind of like Alipay, WePay, right? We have GrabPay. We also have wealth management services that we're rolling out where we give micro insurance, micro wealth management products. Really financial inclusion is at the forefront of what we're trying to do. We have online healthcare. So we have a JV with Ping An Good Doctor, which is the largest telemedicine in China. And we've launched that in Indonesia and we'll roll it out in the rest of Asia because most people don't get to see doctors in that part of the world. So to be able to have a telemedicine angle to have quick diagnosis on non-complicated disease and have medicine delivered to you right away via our fleet, that would be a huge area to look for. So we operate in 339 cities in 8 countries. And with the super app footprint, what is great about it is that there's a huge network effect. We also have really good data. So for example, Darlene, if I know that every morning, if this is the time you leave home to go to work, you normally like to order salad for lunch, you go back home at 4, you respond to our reward. We have a reward loyalty system too, right? So you respond to my rewards on gym memberships and yoga, and at night you order fish. I know that you want to live a healthy lifestyle. I know what it's like, and I will have a way to in a targeted way, send you promotions, meal choices, restaurant choices, all of that, new grocery offering for organic food, you name it. So I think the data part is a huge thing for our super app as well. So really it's just to provide a great online to offline experience, especially in a part of the world where most people are not digital. They're digital savvy, but they don't have the infrastructure. There's a huge gap. So that's why I say leapfrog digitization. When we help people open the first bank accounts, we help them have their first experience and they will go digital. They will not need to take out their credit cards anymore and swipe, which is really the difference between the West and parts of the developing nations now that are leapfrogging. Yeah.
It's interesting how developing nations are leapfrogging the U.S., which have, they always say we're the country where innovation takes place, and it's like I think we're a little bit behind. But that being said, Debbie, your family owned a traditional brick and mortar travel agency when you're growing up, and you are now an executive at 2 of the largest brands in hospitality and tech space. Are there particular shifts and trends that you are focused on now?
Yes. So my parents immigrated to the U.S. from Taiwan in 1980, and my father actually started his first job in the U.S. was a tour guide in San Francisco for Chinese and Taiwanese tour groups visiting the city. And a few years after that, he decided that he would try his own hand at running a travel agency. And so that's the business that I kind of grew up in. I was at my parents' office a lot. I'm the only child. And so travel is very much in my blood. I think one of the, and you're seeing all over the place, not just in the US, but I think in Asia and Europe, LATAM as well, increasingly there are fewer brick and mortar travel agents, right? We're talking about the digitization of traveling, of offline and online kind of merging. People typically don't go to a brick and mortar travel agency. And you're seeing the trend kind of go, like you can look up the prices for your airline, your flight or your hotel on your own. But what's lacking there is you're missing the connection between the agent and the customer, right? And so, when my parents had, longtime customers, we knew like, hey, Mr. Chen likes to fly China Airlines, as on an aisle seat, and he likes the 1 a.m. flight out of SFO instead of the afternoon one, whatever. And you kind of miss that, when you're bringing all of that online. So at Kayak, we've been focused on personalization for a really long time, right? How can we be smarter? How can we anticipate your needs? How can we make you feel like the product was meant for you and serving your needs? So I think that's a big trend I'm seeing. But the other trend is also travel has become, in pre-COVID, just much more accessible than it was when I was growing up, at least, right? Like you can book a flight, on a subway ride from your phone in the matter of 2 or 3 minutes, right? And when I was growing up in the 80s, that was literally impossible. So just we have so much more information and access than we did in previous generations, and I think it's going to be so exciting to see what companies and what this next generation does with it. I think what Grab has done is really amazing, to go from transport and mobility to all the other verticals that Ilaria just mentioned. And I think it's awesome to, offer those services, but also have that kind of humanitarian goal in mind, right? That you're not just providing a service, but you're actually allowing people to access services that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. And I think you're going to see more and more companies lean into that these days.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I just got a notification from Italy, right, telling me that I could book my rail tickets, but I don't think I'm going to Italy soon. Anyway, so, we're talking about, earlier we mentioned that there's going to be changes to the new normal. So what do you think are the innovations in food and hospitality technology that we're going to see stick and shape the industry? So it's not just temporary, but long-term, they're going to stick. Either one.
Yeah, sure. It's nothing I haven't mentioned before, but I think, for any entrepreneurs out there who are interested in this space, like paying attention to the cloud kitchen concept, what it really is using a different lens to look at real estate, right? And look at the areas where you can trim the fat, that you can get rid of inefficiencies. I mean, frankly, at the core of technology is a democratizing platform where you try to eliminate inefficiency and you allow, to have massive scalability, right? And so the whole cloud kitchen and innovative delivery model just allows data to be involved, allow them to fill gaps, right, in cuisine demands, right? So basically, what's popular right away, what people like right away. And then in that case, the bigger implication is to reduce food loss and food waste, which is a huge problem in the developing world and the developed world. I have so many friends who have started and are starting nonprofits that just, transport all the leftovers from like the St. Regis Hotel next door to the slums. That's in India, for example. And that's a massive waste of human energy if you can actually avoid the problem in first place, which we're learning now with a lot of the ESG investments and climate change issues. So on the other hand, I also think that what will stick and shape the industry is if you have a lower risk and lower cost way to help people expand their business, which is what all these influencer, social media marketing, frankly, Netflix, like anything that's really catching fire right now has to have a customer acquisition model that really makes sense for anyone. And the high CapEx days are over. The high barrier to entry days are over, right? Like even like record labels are getting digitized. So I would encourage everyone in whatever industry to think through that. And I think real estate is really a big thing for everyone around the world. In Asia, for example, like real estate is super expensive for us in multiple terms, not only because rich-poor discrepancy is worse, but also we just have less space for more people. We have 4.5 billion people out of 7.5 in the world. And so if you think about even the American way, right? Casual dining, which is like Olive Garden, you know, like that model used to be the hugest segment in America. Now they're just getting hammered because they just have way too much space and way too much staff that they need to hire to fill the space. And that's not something you can get rid of. Same as retail, right? A lot of the Banana Republic equivalents, they just have too many storefronts. So their same store sales numbers are being hit. So I would say definitely look out for that type of business model that can allow you to be nimble and to have a low cost way of expansion, but also, like I mentioned, tech, delivery tech, things that make your life easier and much more convenient. And in the part of the world where it's actually life rearranging, for example, in Jakarta, there's no way I'm going to get out of the office to go across the street to get a Starbucks latte, because I will either get run over on the street because the roads are not built properly for me to cross, or if I get into a car, I'll be stuck in traffic for an hour, which is totally not the right way to use time. So anything that can help fill in those gaps, I think will really shape the industry going forward.
So look
Yeah,
at
that's a great response. I totally agree with all of that. I think on my end, as I mentioned before, contactless. So, and it goes to what Ilaria was saying, making things seamless and easy. So, you know, when you go to a restaurant, not having to flag down the waiter, right? All the things, all the little touch points that if don't go well can be very annoying, right? And now there are safety and health risks to those annoyances. When you're checking into a hotel, why do you have to wait in the line to check in? The room is there. Most of the locks are digitized. So why can't you just put your phone up to the lock and open the door? Right. So there's a lot in the world of contactless, and I think COVID will accelerate a lot of that. And I think also, in addition to all of what Ilaria said, I think there's also opportunity for companies or entrepreneurs who are looking to connect people. So yes, we're talking about contactless and seamless and hassle-free and getting things delivered. But I think at the core, humans crave connection and meaning, right? And in a world where it's harder to be with people in person and easier to be in your house because everything can be delivered and, you know, just you're not having to deal with the outside world, I actually think people will crave that a meaningful interaction much more than before. So any entrepreneurs out there who are, you know, thinking of you know, problems to solve, I do think figuring out a way for people to connect more meaningfully, not that, you know, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever, aren't meaningful, but I think people are craving for something different and something that feels more, maybe it is, you know, in-person interaction. I certainly am.
Cool. We talked on a couple of ideas already, but the thing is that, you know, like on cross-border learnings. So what do you think the San Francisco Bay Area can learn from Asia, from Europe, and other countries that you work with now?
I can't comment on Europe. I don't think I know it well enough from this industry standpoint, but from Asia, for sure, labor diligence, resilience and grit, and a sense of service. You know, I think that even a number of years ago, I think 10 plus years ago, when I was talking to one of the hotel owners from Asia who was in New York with me doing a roadshow, that was when I was still with Goldman Sachs. the first thing that they would say is, I cannot wait to leave the US because people in hotels here don't know how to serve people. The airlines, I mean, gosh, it's like the business class here is like economy over in Asia. And it's not just hardware, right? It's really how they're being treated as well. But hardware plays a big part. There's no sense of wanting to improve. There's actually a complacency, I think. If you're not in the 5-star segment in the US or Europe, if you try to go mass market and you do a 3-star hotel here compared to a 3-star there, my goodness, you go to Chengdu in China, you stay at a Holiday Inn, you feel like you're in a 5-star hotel. So how do you get competitive? I mean, despite the fact that labor cost is much higher out here, how do you drive that sense of experience? Right now, everybody from baby boomers to millennials to Gen Zs, they all want to be treated well. That's the core of a human need. How do you make people feel special as a customer who's paying for the service? So I think that we have a lot to learn from Asia, and I put myself in that bucket because I grew up in Hong Kong and we're in a slightly different place than Philippines, for example. Like, Filipinos are great at hospitality. That's why whether you meet people who serve you in the cruise ship or people who are doing in any industry, a Filipino will make you feel special, and they will go above and beyond to serve you. There's these cultural things that we can also learn. That would be my biggest cross-border learning at this moment.
Debby?
I would say not even cross-border, but I think, and I'm from the Bay Area, and I love San Francisco, and but just to realize that even in America, the landscape is very different than in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And, we very much are in a bubble in the Bay Area, and it's a very unique place. So a lot of the trends and demographics that we see at play in the Bay Area and San Francisco are very, very different than what you see, for example, in Middle America. A friend of ours from Stanford, she's the CEO and founder of Stitch Fix, which is a clothing subscription service. Katrina, I think, is from the Midwest, and she realized there's lots of places in the US where getting to a mall, right, that has clothes that you actually want to buy is hard. Like, it's a haul. It's a 50 to 100-mile trek. Right. And for those of us in the Bay Area or San Francisco, you can get to any place in the Bay Area, you can get to decent mall, 15, 20 minutes. Right. But just understanding that the rest of the country and the rest of the world does not look like San Francisco and the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. So I think that's one. I totally hear Ilaria on the service element of the US versus Asia. I think another trend that I would love to see in San Francisco and the wider or broader US, if you look at countries in Europe, who maybe you could say not as entrepreneurial, not as business friendly, but man, they treat their employees well. And there's just a stronger sense of work-life balance. Women get, it's probably on the average of 6 to 12 months of maternity leave. Healthcare is much cheaper, if not free. So, I mean, those are things that I think, like, really taking care of its population. You can have that while still having grit and resilience and perseverance and working hard, right? So those are also things that I would love to see happen to San Francisco, the Bay Area, and in the US, right? There's so many lessons we can draw from all over the world. That's why I think this organization is so awesome.
Thank you. But, shifting gears, and since you mentioned, we have a lot to learn from other countries who treat their employees well. We're going through this whole Black Lives Matter. You both are women of color, and you've been able to move up through the ranks. And in the US, we say not only breaking the glass ceilings, but the bamboo ceiling in many ways too, because we're Asian, right? So where do you think things are headed in that regard? And especially since that's one of the reasons why we started GlobalSF Women, because we wanted to advise and provide support to female entrepreneurs. But I'd like to hear from each of you.
Wow,
It's a
you way
loaded
to end it
question.
with a bang. Love it. Well, Darlene, it's interesting. I think everyone has a different experience, and I think the biggest danger that I think we all should watch out for is just to bandwagon everyone and just judge the whole group, because it's not true. But for example, when I spent close to 7 years at Goldman Sachs, most of it in New York on the trading floor. It was even the pre-financial crisis, so everyone kind of had a big head at that time. I definitely experienced sexual harassment. I experienced bully, but not just by not really by men particularly, even by women, right? There's that culture. I was very lucky though at that time. My boss is this white Aussie guy who I'm still very grateful to till today. He's still at Goldman. He gave me so many opportunities. He taught me, he gave me all his accounts. There was never a bamboo or gender ceiling for me because of him, because he was a white man that championed female empowerment even before it was trendy. So I think being able to identify these champions is important for anyone of color, women, anyone, right? But later on, as I became a private investor and I traveled the world to go in the field for humanitarian organizations, then, and now, right, doing what I do, which is a combination of things, but I'm most of the time not in a place where I'm being racially discriminated, because I go around Asia a lot. And nowadays, even I come to America, no one dares say anything to an Asian woman. So that part I'm good, but I definitely am most of the time the only woman in the room, or one of the very few. And from very subtle things, people will ask me, oh, so whose wife are you, when we're in a dinner room? But I'm like, actually, I mean, they didn't mean it, but they of course assume that I'm someone's wife. That's the only reason I would be there, right? To find a way to correct, but in a loving way, but also firm way. That is really some wisdom that needs to be learned. I think the playing field is still very much male dominated, even though there is a heavy emphasis now. The time is now to be women, to start making that change. And slowly we're seeing the change. But what I would actually share about that is what my mentor taught me is every human needs to have the ability to savor surprises. So that whenever there's a new idea, a new framework, a new person comes in that challenges your existing framework of existence, you allow and welcome yourself to be corrected, and you welcome yourself to be disrupted. That's the only way you can progress and change, right? But most people don't like to do that, because most people like to pretend they know everything. They don't want to change, and they don't want to admit that they're wrong. And that's what racism is creating a bubble that perpetuates the confirmation bias that we already have. And the older we get, the worse it is. And we only open the door to our own kind. We shut it to the people who are not our own. And hence that's the world we live in now. So I would just encourage everyone to savor surprises, be someone who loves to learn how to learn, be the kind of person that learns and changes all the time. And then we can reverse a lot of this discrimination.
Be open. Debbie.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to follow. Larry, I've got some very good nugget of advice. I would say, so I mean, my parents immigrated, in the early 80s. And I would say, my story is not unique in the Bay Area, right? Asian immigrant, played the game, I would say, well, right? Sometimes I have a baby, he's a toddler, he's 20 months old. He's half Asian, half white. He looks totally Asian. And I'm not saying, there's a little bit of pride in there because apparently my genes are very dominant, but I think about, what it'll be like for him growing up. And, if he grows up in the Bay Area where there's, a lot of half Asian, half Caucasian kids, awesome. We also, spend a bunch of time in New Hampshire, where the state, I think, is 97% white. Mm-hmm. When I go out to dinner or when I go out to the grocery store, I don't see anyone here who looks like me. Wow. Or when I'm in the boardroom, Kayak and Opentable is part of a Booking Holdings. So they also own Priceline, they own Booking.com. And the first board meeting I ever went to, mm-hmm. 2 years ago, there was, out of 50 people, There were 3 women, and I was the only person of color, the only person. And I feel like I've felt that way a lot, like uncomfortable a lot. And I think about being Asian in America is, I think the trials and tribulations for Asian Americans are very different than for Black Americans, for example. And I think the types of racism is different too. For Asian Americans, there's a sense of we are the other, right? The question you get asked all the time is, well, where are you from? For me, I was born in Daly City, you know? But still like, but where are you really from? I recently was on a trivia call, like night with my husband's family, who, as I said, is white. And there was a lot of people on the call. And my son woke up from his nap, and there was an uncle of my husband's on the phone. He'd never seen Stephen before. And he saw him, he was like, does he have a Chinese passport? And I was like, what? No, he doesn't have a Chinese passport. He was born in the US. Well, like, does he have dual citizenship? And he's saying it because he was so taken aback about how Asian my son looked, right? In this very white, Northeastern family. And I didn't say anything at the time. I just took Stephen and went upstairs, and I was not happy. But the thing about facing ignorance or racism is you have to speak up. And if I can't even speak up in my own family, like, how am I going to be able to speak up in that boardroom or on that exec call or with my team? So it starts small too, where you have to start making those corrections and letting people know, like, hey, that's not an okay thing to say. And my son, who looks Asian, is just as much of a place here in this country as your Irish Catholic kids do, right? And that's important to get out there. Like before this, when we were talking about this call, Darlene, you were like, oh my God, Debbie and Ilaria, you have amazing backgrounds. And we were like, yeah, it looks great on paper. And I realized that, like, for me, I wear my Stanford degree, my MIT degree, my exec title as defense badges to show, hey, I played the game, I played it really well, and I belong. But when I'm at the grocery store during COVID-19, no one sees chief executive who went to Stanford, right? They see a Chinese person who might have COVID. And so, like, those are all things that, all of us grapple with. And for my Black friends and colleagues, I think it's heartbreaking what's happening. And I'm trying to do my part as much as I can to listen, right? Because I know the experience is very, very different. And then to act in ways that I can do something about it.
Thank you for sharing all that. And the whole thing now is being open. I think that, borderless now in many ways, because everybody's doing everything by Zoom. So I'm just hoping that, with this experience with COVID, post-COVID, that everybody just becomes more, accepting, right? And less ignorant in many ways, because you have no excuse. So that being said, let's open this up to questions from our participants. Again, if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A section. I am not going to be reading questions from the Zoom webinar chat box, okay? One question that I don't know who to direct this to. Either of one of you can take this, but it's more on a smaller scale, like more neighborhood. And the question comes from Voss, who's with the San Francisco neighborhoods, business corridors. And what can commercial neighborhood corridors and cities do to bring back residents and visitors to their streets, fostering authentic human connections? To your point, Debbie, you talked about the need and the craving for, social interaction, human interaction that is lacking now during COVID. And, Ilaria, you also mentioned that, like in places like in Jakarta, where, people want the delivery because they can't travel because they don't want to get run over. So any
Yeah, I mean, I think right now people are hungry and are looking for an excuse to interact and meet their neighbors. In some places in San Francisco, like I used to live in Russian Hill and in the Marina, you're in pretty close quarters, but oftentimes you don't know the people around you, right? Like, so I think a way to bring, bring people back to, your part of the city or your avenue, is to get the word out either on Facebook or next door or whatever way you're communicating to your residents. Like, hey, we're hosting a, I don't know, I guess it can't be a potluck because that's not COVID-19 safe, but like, hey, we're celebrating the, opening of outdoor dining for this corner restaurant. Come stop by and say hi. Masks are encouraged. And I think people will come because they're just so hungry for human interaction. That's not the people that they've been locked down with. Even small stuff like that. There are a few restaurants on the OpenTable platform who have just started opening. And because of the social distancing, we've had restaurants who put in mannequins at tables so it doesn't seem as empty, right? Because they have to space out the tables. We even had a restaurant in Las Vegas, of all places, who put in and got the community to donate teddy bears and dolls to sit there. And this is like a high-end restaurant in Vegas, right? Yeah. But like the community rallied, and even little stuff like that, I think will really resonate with people and draw them, back to your area of the city.
Yeah, no, super great ideas. I mean, for me, I think the emphasis is really service. I think, for example, like there's a private members club in Singapore I'm a part of called Straits Clan. And during this COVID period, they actually brought together all kind of well-known chefs to the club, and they just gave the space for them, and they all cooked and made meals to give to the needy. So really, not only are they making good use of real estate that is not being used, they are bringing talent that is idle and channeling into the greater good of serving the community. And especially in the world we live in today, it's not the elites that need more stimulation, it's the masses, it's the people who are being underserved. And frankly, when you serve the underserved, it gives you more life as a person. And there is no better way than to serve together to foster human connection. When I go on the road and go visit the slums with people, we may have nothing in common, but at the end of the trip, I mean, I think I'm closer to them than most people I've worked and sat next to for years at the bank. And I think that in San Francisco, when people are so angry, even before COVID, right? Like they breaking car windows, like all kinds of stuff. The whole America's angry, but in certain areas where it's so unaffordable to live, to think from the lens of service, you can do anything. I have a friend who started a bunch of trucks called Mobilize Love. I mean, Jeremy Lin is one of the supporters, and they've been just driving around trucks and giving free food to Hispanic, Black, any communities that frankly are receptive. I think Chinese people are less receptive to asking for help, but actually they're getting a very multiracial crowd in San Francisco. And it's a beautiful time when people just come together and eat together, and and there's so many activities that could be done. Of course, you need government to help too with safety enforcement and all of that, but the sky is the limit, I think, if we think for our neighbor.
Yeah, and all the social impact just brings economic impact, and that's what we're all here for. So anyway, we received a question for Ilaria. What is the potential challenges you see or solutions there might be for Cloud Kitchen to spread across the US?
Yeah, what a great question. Cloud Kitchen, if it's done well, is a great business model. But I think there are two things that came to mind right away. Is you actually have to have a reliable driver base. You have to have drivers that are willing to work hard in a consistent way. And in order to do that, like Debbie said, you have to treat your employees well. You have to pay them a wage that could retain them, so you don't have to keep recruiting and training. At the same time, you have to ensure the environment that they're delivering, right, is a place where they can have a safe passageway to do their job. So there's a supply constraint matter that needs to be solved. You need to have very good running of the products, but also you have to know the neighborhood and the city well. I mean, in parts of LA, for example, people would just be stuck in traffic all day long. So how do you think of creative ways, right? And in Southeast Asia, we can do it because everyone delivers on motorcycle. You can bypass traffic. But in a very car-reliant country like the US, the geography, the timing of transport, all of those needs to be thought well. But we've had very successful drone delivery. Sure, if you can get that to be legalized, that is a theme that a lot of startups are working on. I think that you definitely have to think through that. I think if you can do motorcycle fleet, that's a great idea. And some of I think GlobalSF can point you to a few people who are very successful too in the cloud kitchen business who can also discuss if you're interested.
Thank you. We only have 1 minute left, so I don't think we can take any more questions. However, before I close, I want to say that, again, today's webinar is being recorded. It will be made available on our website, and we'll be also sending it to all those that participated. But I would like to thank our partners who made today's program possible. One's the California International Trade Center, the CITC, our partners in working with entrepreneurs and founders, Next Gen Chef, the Golden Gate Restaurant Association. We could not have put this program together without the Small Business Development Center and the San Francisco Office of Economic Workforce Development. So funding from the SBDC allows GlobalSF to provide services to businesses. So learn how you can benefit from those services. Contact us at info@globalsf.biz. And with that, would either of you want to add anything? No? Thank you so much for joining us. I had such a good time talking to you two, and I learned a lot today. I'm sure our audience and participants did as well. You know, again, everything's going to be online. Thank you for joining us, and everyone stay tuned because we do have more programs coming up down the line. Again, thank you so much, and everyone have a very good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.